10 rockets struck an airbase in western Iraq that houses U.S. coalition troops. The Pentagon says one U.S. contractor died from a heart attack. Former Vice President Mike Pence is breaking his silence. He rails against the Democrats' HR1, or the People's Act, saying the Democrats' push for election laws is an unconstitutional power grab. And 2 states are rolling back mask mandates. The governor of Mississippi saying the executive orders have to end at the earliest possible moment. This is that moment for Mississippi. The governor of Texas, meanwhile, announcing his state is 100% open for business starting next week. Tune into Deep Dive as we explore these topics and more. Hello and welcome. This is Deep Dive and I'm Tiffany Meier. Let's kick off with some world news. Several rockets struck an airbase in Iraq that houses U.S. coalition troops. A coalition spokesman tweeting 10 rockets hit the U.S. Al-Assad base in western Iraq in the early morning. The Iraqi military released a statement saying the attack did not cause significant losses, adding that security forces had found the launch pad used for the missiles. Coalition and Iraqi forces are investigating. The Pentagon says one U.S. contractor died from a heart attack. Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby said the contractor suffered a cardiac episode while sheltering and died shortly afterward. He said there were no service members injured and all are accounted for. Today's attack is the first since the U.S. struck Iran-aligned militia targets along the Iraq-Syria border last week. That was the first such strike ordered under the Biden administration. The strike had been in response to a slew of rocket attacks that targeted the American presence in Iraq. U.S. troops have significantly reduced their presence in Iraq last year. They're mainly at a few bases now. Today's attack comes just 2 days before Pope Francis is set to visit Iraq. The highly anticipated trip will include Baghdad, southern Iraq, and the northern city of Irbil. Now turning to the U.S., the National Guard is set to assist U.S. Capitol Police with increased security around the Capitol for a number of days. That's because March 4th is a historical presidential inauguration date. That changed in 1933 with the passage of the 20th Amendment. The department saying it's aware of concerning information and intelligence pertaining to March 4th and continues to work with all of our law enforcement partners. Capitol Police are increasing measures in case of protests, as some conspiracy theories on social media platforms suggests former President Trump will return and reclaim power on Thursday. Speaking of the National Guard, a whistleblower shows pictures of undercooked meat and metal shavings and meals served to National Guard troops stationed in Washington. The National Guard confirms soldiers got the undercooked food. The whistleblower from the Michigan National Guard claims some guardsmen got sick. The Michigan National Guard sent out an announcement saying they are very concerned. It reads, the first-hand accounts and pictures of undercooked food being served clearly shows that what is being given to Michigan service members is unacceptable. Some politicians expressed outrage. Michigan Senator Debbie Stabenow tweets that the situation is unacceptable, there is no excuse, and she wants an immediate fix. Michigan Senator Gary Peters tweets that the situation is outrageous. He writes to the governor of Michigan and National Guard leaders, after several attempts to rectify the situation, I believe the only appropriate course of action is for the immediate cancellation of the existing food contract, the disbursement of per diem for the remaining duration of the mission. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Carver wrote to the Epoch Times saying that over 1 million meals have since been served since the troops arrived in Washington. He says there have been no reported cases of troops getting sick from the food. He says inspections of vendors, meals, and facilities are comprehensive, and a very small percentage of meals have reported problems. The Michigan National Guard says the deployment is scheduled to end March 12th. Troops are planning to return home after that. Now, let's turn to the controversial For the People Act, or HR1, that Democrats are pushing for. It's a massive proposal with nearly 800 pages. It would make federal laws out of many of the most controversial 2020 presidential election voter registration and voting procedures. These measures were originally implemented by state officials in response to the pandemic and national lockdown. Some of the hotly contested provisions include providing universal national mail-in balloting, registration of 16 and 17-year-olds, permanent early voting, Minimal verification for online registration, legalization of ballot harvesting, federal matching funds to candidate for private contributors, and voting rights for felons upon completing of their sentences. But the proposal also contains other major changes, such as bureaucratic regulation of who can say what and when about a candidate for federal office. The Federal Election Commission would be converted to a partisan majority rules entity, rather than the present structure that requires bipartisan support for regulations. It would also legalize federal candidates to draw salaries from campaign funds contributed by individuals and special interests concerned about proposals before Congress. In Tuesday's debate on the floor, the House considered 56 amendments. Only 7 were from Republicans. Some Republicans have said the bill would ensure that GOP candidates would never get elected again during presidential races. The House is voting on the final passage today. And former Vice President Mike Pence is railing against HR1. It's his first op-ed since leaving office. Pence says the Democrats' push for election laws is an unconstitutional power grab. He says he shares the concerns of millions of Americans about the integrity of the 2020 election. Writing, "That's why when I was serving as presiding officer of the joint session of Congress certifying the Electoral College results, I pledged to ensure that all objections properly raised under the Electoral Count Act would be given a full hearing before Congress and the American people." Pence went on to say, while legislatures in many states have begun work on election reform to restore public confidence in state elections, unfortunately, congressional Democrats have chosen to sweep those valid concerns and reforms aside and to push forward a brazen attempt to nationalize elections in blatant disregard of the U.S. Constitution. He says the People's Act would trample the First Amendment as well as erode Americans' confidence in their elections. He went on to say in a tweet, HR1, the so-called For the People Act, will increase opportunities for election fraud, trample the First Amendment, further erode confidence in our elections, and should be rejected by every member of Congress and opposed by every patriotic American. Pence came under fire from former President Donald Trump on January 6th during the joint sessions of Congress. Trump tweeted that Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving states a chance to certify a corrected set of facts. Soon after, Twitter deleted the post and permanently suspended Trump's Twitter account, accusing him of inciting the violence at the Capitol. Now, let's talk masks. Mississippi is the first state to lift the mask mandate and open all business. The governor announcing on Tuesday, "We are lifting all of our county mask mandates and businesses will be able to operate at full capacity without any state-imposed rules." Adding, "Our hospitalizations and case numbers have plummeted, and the vaccine is being rapidly distributed. It is the time." He also notes he is against some of the restrictions that came with the executive orders, writing, "Executive orders that interfered with people's lives were the worst, but the only possible intervention for much of the last year." He went on to say, "Now we are putting our focus towards rapid vaccine distribution. We are getting out of the business of telling people what they can and cannot do." He went on to say, "We need to recognize that none of these orders in any state are anything short of unprecedented. They have to end at the earliest possible moment. This is that moment for Mississippi." So what restrictions remain in the state? According to the Daily Journal, the governor saying Tuesday afternoon there's still a 50% capacity limit on indoor areas. He told reporters schools K through 12 will still require 50% capacity for outdoor venues and 25% seating capacity for indoors. His comments came just hours after a similar announcement in Texas. Governor Greg Abbott saying Texas is 100% open starting next Wednesday. Texas Governor Greg Abbott says it is time to restore normalcy and livelihoods for Texans. He says deaths and hospitalizations are down, and a number of indicators are heading in the right direction. He says 7 million Texans will have the vaccine by the end of the week, including half the state's seniors. Texas is one of a growing number of states loosening restrictions as virus numbers drop. But CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky says we are not even close to being ready to relax safeguards. She claims the gains are stalling at 70,000 cases and 2,000 deaths per day. In a press conference on Monday, she announced that at this level of cases, with variants spreading, we stand to completely lose the hard-earned ground we have gained. Governor Abbott says he understands COVID is still a threat, but the Texans know the tools to protect themselves. People still have the option to wear a mask if they want to. In his announcement, Abbott said, with this executive order, we are ensuring that all businesses and families in Texas have the freedom to determine their own destiny. Texas is one of the most populous states in America, with nearly 29 million residents. Abbott says nearly 2.5 million Texans are confirmed to have recovered from the virus. He added that health officials say the real number of recoveries is typically 4 to 5 times the number of those officially tested. As for the vaccine, Abbott's office says nearly 5.7 million vaccine shots have been administered to Texans, and the state is now administering almost 1 million shots each week. By next Wednesday, that number is expected to be about 7 million. And a quick update on New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. New York state legislatures are revoking Cuomo's pandemic-linked emergency powers. The New York State Legislature announced Tuesday it has reached a deal to repeal Governor Andrew Cuomo's emergency powers. This comes as Cuomo faces 2 scandals over his alleged cover-up of virus cases in nursing homes and allegations of sexual harassment. This will return decision-making power over issues like lockdowns back to local control. Cuomo was granted the powers exactly a year ago, but now the lawmakers say they are no longer needed and that the public deserves to have checks and balances. The legislation is expected to pass as early as Friday. And a growing number of New York Democrats have called on the governor to resign or be impeached. But what do you think? Let me know below. Thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive. I'm Tiffany Meier, and see you soon.